Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our first podcast, the Ali Brothers podcast. And today we have a very special guest. We have a very beautiful individual with us today, so it comes right into the Ali Brothers vibe with us today, if I can say that. Today we have our brother Shabbir Hassan from the UK. And it's an honor to have you as our first international guest on our podcast.
Alhamdulillah. My pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be the first on your podcast, and inshallah it's a start of something amazing for you guys,
Inshallah. Just to briefly introduce brother Shabbir Hassan, he is an Imam and he is a Hafid who has memorized the Quran. He is an author of a book called A Beautiful Patience. He is the founder of the Nikah Company, which is the UK's leading bespoke Nikah service provider. He is a podcast host at Ilmfeed, and he is facilitator at FaithSpaceUK. So once again, it's an honor to have you here. Assalamu alaikum.
So this time I'm on the other side of the podcast.
That's it.
I'm not interviewing, I'm being interviewed, so
yeah.
It's nice to be on the other side.
That's it. How does it feel to be on the other side?
It feels good because obviously when you're on the hosting side, you're thinking about so many other things, and I can just sit here now and just take it all in. But I don't know what you're going to ask me, so
right.
That's the other thing, right? So go easy on me.
Oh, we'll see about that, inshallah. We'll see. Very good. So we'll start off with some quick fire questions, inshallah.
Okay.
So we're not intending to catch you out with any of these.
Okay.
Wink, wink. We'll get started with the first one. So, Android or Apple?
Android all day, every day. Yeah, I've failed already, I know.
Yes, I'm not sure if we can continue.
I'm sticking to my guns here.
Okay, mashallah. Tea or coffee?
Neither.
Neither.
I genuinely don't drink tea and I don't drink coffee.
Right.
But and I know your background is in dentistry, so I shouldn't be saying this, but I have a lot of sugar otherwise. Like, my thing is after I eat, I have to have sweets.
Right.
Like something sweet. But I can't, tea, coffee, it's not for me.
In Ramadan, what do you have to satisfy that?
Same. Like, literally, I would just after iftar, I just have some sweets.
Right.
Literally, that's it. The only drink I have, and it sounds really childish, but it's hot chocolate. It
yes,
sounds very childish, but it's one of those things where it's like, I'm never going to say no to a hot chocolate.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Mecca or Medina?
You can't do that. You can't choose. Mecca, because of the Kaaba, you can't go wrong, but you can't beat the vibe in Medina.
It's amazing.
It's something else. You can't beat the vibe. How many times have you been?
We've been quite a few times, myself and my brother. Recently, the year before COVID, actually, we went for Umrah in Ramadan, actually.
Okay.
And that was a few years since our last one, so it's really amazing. Like, it's so good to go back to the Kaaba and to Medina. But there's such a clear difference between... we were in Medina first and we went to Mecca. Like, it was so chill in Medina. Yeah, like, it's like you can be wherever and like you're...
Everything, the temperature, the atmosphere, the vibe, everything's different.
Yeah, the people, like, it's so chill. Then when you go to Mecca, everything is fast paced.
Yeah, like, it's non-stop.
And then with the construction as well. Like,
it's always going on. So we went, alhamdulillah, last year we went twice. One time I went just with family because it was my wife's first time, so I just wanted to go just with her. And my daughter was like 4 months old at that time, so she was just tiny, we were just carrying everyone, mashallah. And then the second time we went with a group, so we were needing a group, and we took like 45 people with us. We did both, like just family and then with a group as well. So alhamdulillah, one of my things is that like every year, if Allah wills, I have to go for Umrah. Like, that's just one thing. I just feel empty if I don't go like within that year.
Yeah, definitely. How's it been since COVID?
There were a lot of changes the first time we went last year, especially just small things like kids, not like letting kids in, and you're only allowed in the main tawaf area if you have the ihram on. Otherwise, if you're only performing Umrah, otherwise you have to go on like the first floor and things. So it did take that kind of feeling away, especially in Mecca. Medina was just pretty much business as usual. But yeah, Mecca, it was quite upsetting that once you've done the Umrah, that's it, you can't get close to the Kaaba again. And they blocked off things and you couldn't go into the Hatim area and things like that. But yeah, I guess, the fact that we were there, I was just grateful, to be honest with you, just being back again and seeing it, especially after that COVID break.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Favorite ayah in the Quran right now? I know you don't like answering this kind of question,
Yeah.
but what verse resonates with you the most at the moment?
I would perhaps say, so this one I've always had anyway, but I think even right now and always it's one of those, I don't know exactly what verse it was, but Surah Al-Talaq, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ. I think that is just, it touches on, like, in terms of life, it touches on everything, right? Taqwa, Allah promises, if you have taqwa of Allah, if you're conscious of Him, if you're mindful of Him, He'll find a way out for you. يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He'll find a way out of anything you're facing, right? And then وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. He will provide for you from places that you never even could imagine. And I think for me, that's I think we've all faced that, like, Allah just provides, right? Even when you're not asking for it, He gives you an opportunity. He gives you, something comes from somewhere. And then the final bit, which is, إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ. Like, Allah will help you reach your goal. So I think those like three parts in that one verse, or in that one section, for me, it gets me through, and it's very, very comforting.
Inshallah, very good, very good. Your favorite reciter?
So like, if I was to choose one as an example from, like, the Haram, like from Haramain, let's just say, Makkah, Medina, then it's not, I don't know why every time I mention this, it's not like a popular choice, but for me, it's hands down, it's Sheikh Bandar Balila. And I know he's not the go-to, people go for others, right? But Sheikh Bandar Balila, because the way, okay, maybe he doesn't have, like, the most melodious and all of that, right? But when he recites, in terms of, like, tajweed and clarity, he's right at the top for me personally. And in terms of the meaning coming through when he's reciting the verse, you can really feel it. And the final thing, which is, a lot of people don't pick up on this, right? But he is really good at picking relevant verses for the right occasion. So, for example, like, there was one time it was raining in Mecca, and he recited verses about rain. Alam tara anna Allah anzala minas sama'i ma'an. So people, if you don't know, then you won't pick up on these things. Or if it's like during Hajj time, he'll pick Hajj verses, Ramadan. So those types of things I really appreciate about him. It's the small things. So for me, Sheikh Bandar Balila, when he says Allahu Akbar, he does the takbir in Mecca. Oh man, I get so happy. I'm like, finally. You have your childhood ones like Sheikh Sudais and stuff. And when you hear them, you're like, wow, okay, but yeah, Sheikh Bandar Balila for me.
He's also very unique in his recitation.
Very, yeah. Don't you think? So, but like I said, others, they go for your, Sheikh Mahid Ma'iqali, he of course is great as well. I think Sheikh Mishari, just generally speaking, is great. But yeah, I think Sheikh Bandar Balila is a go-to for me.
Very good. Favorite destination that you've been to recently?
So alhamdulillah, last year, because my daughter was born end of 2021. So last year, 2022, my wife and I, we said, right, because of COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. And we were thinking, right, can we still travel, because we now have a baby? We were like, why should we let having a baby stop us from traveling, right? So literally from the moment, I think my daughter was like 2 months old, that's it. We went to Scotland, then we went to Turkey. So in the end, my daughter, up until now, she's only 15 months, so just over a year old. She's been to, Ireland is her 10th country.
MashaAllah.
So Ireland is her 10th country in a year. So we went to Alhamdulillah, we went to Turkey, we went to Italy, we went to Saudi twice, like I said. We went to Morocco, and a few other places like Egypt, etc. So like, yeah, she's mashallah well traveled, and that's one thing. If there's anyone listening right now that's like a new parent or having children soon, etc., inshallah, I would say don't let having children stop you from traveling and just doing your thing. It's one thing that, yeah, fair enough, my daughter's not going to remember these places she's traveled to, but she still enjoyed it, and we all enjoyed it, and the memories that we created and the videos and the pictures that we have now, you're never going to forget that. But yeah, I would say I'd probably say Turkey is great. We went to Istanbul, we went to Bodrum, So different places. I think Turkey's like great because it has like everything. It has the weather, it has the food, it has the culture, it has the history. I don't think you can beat Turkey. Like we went to other places as well. It has one but not the other. Like as an example, I'm going to say something controversial, right? Can I say something controversial?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
We're all up for that in this podcast.
Okay, cool. So I am not against, but I don't believe in the hype of Dubai and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, like like a lot of my friends and like people that I know, they're like any opportunity, Dubai, UAE, or this place, that place, right? I get it, nice weather, right? I get all of that. It's nice weather, it's halal food, etc. But for me, it's like it's overpriced. You can get nice weather other places, and this is a controversial bit. I don't mean this in a bad way, especially to the locals, etc. But in terms of like history, like for us as Muslims, it doesn't have that. They have their own culture, all of that is there. But in terms of like history, like when you go to Turkey, you see the masjid.
Yeah.
It's not only is it grand and it's amazing, but like there's history behind it. There's stories behind this, right? Whereas, you'll see nice buildings or nice structures in other places in the world, but in terms of the history, it's not really there. It's just it was built a few years ago. It's grand. Okay, it costs a lot of money, but so for me, I go there and I don't feel it. I don't feel it. We went there last year, but that was just a stopover because we went to Qatar, right? We spent more time in Qatar, but so that's my controversial opinion. I know not a lot of Muslim young guys and girls are not going to agree with that, but for me, Dubai and UAE is not the one. It's going to be places like Turkey or Egypt and places like that. What do you think about that, by the way?
I think the thing about Dubai is you really have to go out of your way to integrate into the culture and into the history of things. If you go to a place like Turkey, it's in your face. You don't have an option but to kind of be involved in that. Yeah. But with a place like Dubai, like most of the things that you're going to do, you're going to go to the Dubai Mall, you're going to go to the Burj Khalifa. Like it's not particularly unique, and like a lot of the things that you do over there, you can do in many places in the West.
Exactly. So, exactly. Because literally, I went to some places in Dubai, which it literally was a carbon copy of some places in London.
Yes. Yeah.
Just with nice weather, like really nice weather, and maybe halal food. But even it's just literally it's the same. Some things I just feel like they replicated almost.
Right.
And I just felt like it's shopping malls. I can do this anytime. But I get it. If you're going there and you're like, maybe you're going in terms of like you're moving there, you've got a career. I get that, fair enough. It makes sense for a lot of people in terms of the career-wise and so on. Even the whole like moving there, I don't really get it, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people that are moving there, unless like it's set for your career. There's just this hype of just moving to Dubai, just so I can say it's a Muslim country, etc. But if it's a Muslim country, but is it an Islamic country? There's a difference between the two. And again, people listening, I don't need to think I'm like a hater. I don't like Dubai or something. It's genuinely nice, but if you're going for religious reasons, Islamic reasons, then I don't know if Dubai is going to be at the top of the list. I think there's other places you could potentially explore. Like we went to Far East, Malaysia, Indonesia, beautiful. Like it's amazing over there. Like you can sense that Islam there. It's got some culture. It's got some history as well, and it's Muslim country. So Far East is nice. I haven't been there in a while, so I think we need to go there soon.
I've never been there myself either.
Yeah.
Very good. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
I think I'm more of a night owl. I've always been a night owl, even though I should be an early bird, and I push others to be early birds, but as in just naturally inbuilt within me, and I try to be more of an early bird, but I'm just that kind of person that I think a lot, and in terms of the creative juices, it's nighttime for me. It's nighttime.
Very good.
I'm more productive in the morning time, but like I said, in terms of the creativity, I can stay up till late and I can get a lot of, whether it's writing or planning and things like that, I can get it done in the nighttime.
Very good. I was kind of hoping that you said that.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to my brother on the way. I was listening to a podcast with Mufti Menk and he was asked this question and he said night owl. And like the first thing that came into my mind was I'd love to hear him explain that. Because in one sense, it's like, as a Muslim, are you even allowed to be a night owl? Because like you have to take advantage of the morning, and of course there's barakah and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting because I feel like I'm the same with the nighttime, and you have that creativity and things going.
But you know what? I'll give you a reference from the Quran, almost, right? it's not a direct reference, but it's in Surah Al-Muzammil, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mainly referring to the night prayer, right? But then he refers to like the stillness of the night, inna nashi'at al-layli. And I in terms of like reflection, in terms of spiritual, even like that seclusion, that solitude, that closeness to Allah, dua, like why is tahajjud time, that last portion of the night, why is it so blessed as well? I think it's because of that. There's that stillness of the night, it's quiet, less distractions. Whereas in the morning, yeah, of course, it's full of barakah, but like in the morning, okay, I have to go to work. There's something to do next. Right. Your day is beginning, so you're not really focused. You're thinking about the next thing to do. Whereas in the night, you're not thinking about the next thing. You're in the moment. So I think you can take that from the Quran, the stillness of the night, and I think that definitely puts you in some kind of mood to get more things done. And again, from historically speaking, like the scholars, like classically, in terms of their writing and the authoring of their works, you'll find a lot of them literally nighttime. In fact, I've mentioned a really amazing story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story actually because it's too long. But essentially, what happened was I believe that there's conflicting reports, but it's said about Imam Shafi'i, the famous great Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, that there was one time where basically he went over to stay in someone's house, and they expected that this is Imam Shafi'i, right? He is going to pray all night long, and he's going to be, mashallah, tahajjud, etc., right? But literally, like, he went to his room, and then at Fajr time, he comes out. They didn't hear anything. They were like, so this guy wasn't praying? What kind of Imam is he? Yeah. And in fact, he didn't even, when he prayed Fajr, he didn't even make wudu. Right. He just prayed Fajr without wudu. They're just like, so this Imam doesn't pray in the night. He didn't do anything spectacular. Yeah. And he prays Fajr without wudu. So what kind of Imam is this, right? And then later on, the explanation was that, listen, when I went to bed, I didn't sleep. I sat there and I thought about one hadith, one narration of the Prophet ﷺ, and that kept me up all night. And I thought about it. And from that, I extracted like dozens and dozens of different lessons and theories and ahkam and rulings from that one narration. What is that narration? When the Prophet said to a young companion, Ya Aba Umayr ma fa'al al-Nughayr. Right. That famous companion, that famous narration, right? Where he lost his pet bird and he said, what happened to your pet bird? He says, from that I extracted so many lessons. So I didn't sleep, and because I didn't sleep, I didn't lose my wudu. So here I am. So yes, I didn't spend the night in worship, but I spent it in terms of pursuit of knowledge and things. So I think that also proves, like, nighttime, that thinking mode, or reflection. Yeah.
It's very good. Like, it's the first time that I've heard that kind of concept made that way. And that's something that is, like, it's unfortunate about the internet, because you hear one side of the story, you hear one opinion, and that's the only thing that you hear. And if you hear something different, it's like, it's such a, like, certain things are such dogmas because of social media. It's like you can't have another opinion. And even this whole thing of, like, you have like these CEOs or business personalities or whatever, right? And they tell you about their morning routine. And they wake up at 3-4 a.m. And they hit the gym, and then they do this, that, and then and what that does, right, is it almost makes you feel bad. Like, I'm not waking up at 4 a.m. And doing X, Y, Z. I'm waking up at whatever, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., right? And then I'm starting my day. But for me, like, I don't think you necessarily have to wake up that early. You have to have the balance of getting good enough, sleep and rest. Of course, not, prioritizing your worship as well, not missing Isha, not missing Fajr. So making sure you're doing all of that right. And then, of course, if you can wake up early, even slightly early, and get things done, that's great. But I think, this whole social media, this hustle, like, mentality and culture of, like, wake up early, get so much done. And then what happens is burns people out. Spiritually, physically, mentally, it just burns you out. So I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. When I hear it now, I'm not I'm impressed, and I feel like these people that are doing it, they're like multi-millionaires or billionaires. So they have the luxury of, like, waking up early and, like, going to the gym and doing X and Y, because they probably have, like, hundreds of employees doing all the work for them. You know what I mean? Whereas people, like the average person out there, has to wake up and just get work done, and has family and things like that. So I'm not a huge fan of the hustle thing. I think there's always a balance for us as Muslims. Definitely. And that's something that we'll get into later, inshallah, in terms of getting that balance.
Yeah. Sure.
And taking good from wherever you can find it. It doesn't have to be from the Islamic scholars from the past. There's a lot of good that you can get from everywhere, like on social media, from non-Muslims. There's so much that we can get to improve ourselves as Muslims. The last quick fire question that we have, and
it wasn't very quick fire.
the viewers are like, this is going on for a bit, but I love explaining the answer, the answers that you have. It's quick fire that you think of it quickly, but it's really deep when you explain yourself. So the last question that I have, inshallah, is if you were stranded on a desert island with 3 influential Muslims from the past,
right,
who would you choose?
Right. So it's such a tough one. From the past, okay, I would say definitely I'd have to have a chat with, I think, Imam Shafi'i, because of his knowledge, but also his creative side. He was a poet, and he has his diwan of Imam Shafi'i. I have it at home, so I appreciate that side of him as well. So I think I'd love to speak with him and hear about his experiences. And also, he's very well travelled compared to all the other imams, the 4 imams. Yeah. He was, literally, he literally travelled to Mecca. I think he passed away in Egypt, Palestine. So he travelled all over, and he went to Iraq as well. And one unique thing about him is that he studied under Imam Abu Hanifa's students. Yes. He also studied under Imam Malik. So he has that kind of almost a connection. So he's like a great kind of segue to all of the 4 great imams. So definitely, I think Imam Shafi'i would be right up there. Yeah. In terms of the rest, honestly, I'm stuck. It's really tough one. Imam Shafi'i, I've always had that in mind, but the rest from the past, I mean, can we go as far as back as a Sahaba, like the companions, or are we like?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Or even living today.
Or even living today. I met one sheikh recently that I'm a huge fan of. Again, because of, in terms of like as an imam, the work that he does, and that's Sheikh Omar Suleiman. As an imam, I just feel like in terms of course, the knowledge, the series that he has. I mean, people are a huge fan of the series that he does in Ramadan. The activism, every kind of area he's covered very well. So as an imam, I feel like, mashallah, he's in the 21st century imam in the West today. I think he's doing great work. So alhamdulillah, I met him a few months ago for the first time. But yeah, in terms of like from history, probably I'd have to say someone like we were talking about Turkey earlier on. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Ertuğrul and these kind of series. So probably someone from that era.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be like Ertuğrul, but like whether it's Osman or from that era, just to hear about like how they did it. Even like when you go you go to Istanbul and you see the buildings, you're like, how did they do that in a time with like no technology? Like how did they get that done? So I would love to hear about just that, and even just the like I said, the creative side, the design aspect, the history, the thinking, the vision that they had. I would love to hear about that. So yeah, sorry, I'm not being specific there, but those are some
that's very
general
interesting.
answers.
That's a nice mix.
Yeah.
And that's it for the quick fire questions.
Yeah.
Based on that last question, actually, I wanted to discuss that. You mentioned Sheikh Omar Suleiman. I don't want to be too controversial, but it's no surprise that because of the media, there's been issues where people like himself and people who are well known have been put under fire for things that they've done in public.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I'm speaking as if I'm 50 years old, but when I was like 12, 13 years old, I used to follow, maybe I won't mention the name, but another influential speaker, scholar. And there was a lot going on the media about like, is he a proper Muslim? Is he a scholar? Is he this? And like, I was like, what am I supposed to do? Especially when you're young like that and you don't really know the religion, that you can actually take something and you can leave something and you can disagree with people. But I was like, look, I don't really know. Okay, he teaches Arabic, oh, I'm sure that should be okay. Like it's a language.
Yeah.
But later on, I came across the saying of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, where he said that along the lines of that, there is no one that when it comes to everyone, that you take the good and you leave the bad.
Exactly, yeah.
When it comes to everyone. With the exception of the companion of this grave, the Prophet ﷺ. So with the exception of the Prophet ﷺ, who you take everything from, everyone else, you can take the good and you can leave the bad. And with that, I was thinking that, okay, that's such a good mindset to have. That can be a Muslim scholar, that can be a Muslim youngster, that can be a non-Muslim CEO or something. And you can, if you know what you're saying, and like we're not saying that you can take Aqidah from like non-Muslims, but like that really helped me in that situation. What do you have to say about like how divisive the media is, especially when it comes to personalities? And it's like, okay, you can't take from this guy and they're very specific, they're very exclusionary about things.
Yeah. So firstly, I'll just say that saying I also live by. And in Arabic, there's this famous like classical Arabic saying, which is like "Khudh ma safa wa da' ma kadir." It's like almost like a reference, like water. So it's like take the clean water,
right?
But at the end where you're going to find like it gets more muddy, right? Just leave that which is muddy, but take go to where the water is more kind of flowing and take the pure water, right? So that's almost like a principle for life, where like you said, right, you can take it from really anyone. But also you have to be careful because, like for example, like you mentioned a few examples like Aqidah. So in terms of Islamic knowledge, not everyone can make that judgment for themselves because they might think they're taking what is good, but actually it's not. And like I said, social media is a great example of that today because you have, numbers dictate everything. Numbers dictate. So if you have someone who has a large following, automatically people assume, well, that must mean that's some credibility right there, even if that person has not studied anything, right? They're just regurgitating. In fact, I'll give you an example. Someone that I knew, of course I'm going to go into specifics here, but someone that I knew once used to, every now and again, every so often, like WhatsApp me, send me some messages, send me some voice notes, like, hey, can you like translate this for me? Can you explain this hadith for me? Can you give your reflections on this? So I just thought innocently that this person's getting in touch to just ask for some advice, and I just thought, so I just send voice notes back. Yeah, this is these are my thoughts on this. Little did I know that behind the scenes they were on Instagram taking what I was saying and basically posting like videos. And mashallah, they got a nice beard and stuff. So people and at one point I looked, I was like, this person's got over 100,000 followers from like just taking snippets here and there, and people are like literally following, thinking this must be some sheikh, some alim or something. And I know this person for a fact has not studied anything, doesn't know Arabic, barely can recite Quran properly, but the way that they're presenting themselves, it seems amazing, right? And then next thing you know, wallahi, I'm not even exaggerating, they are taking Umrah groups. They're taking people for Umrah. People are paying to go and take them as a spiritual guide. And I was just like, this is dangerous, so dangerous, right? There's a saying that a half-qualified doctor, right, puts your life at risk, right? A half-qualified scholar or knowledgeable person puts your iman, puts your entire faith, your religion at risk, right? And for me, that's what it was. So I was just shocked, right? But, as is, I believe, the sunnah of Allah, these things don't last. So this person gone, they're not even around anymore. It just didn't last because one of my teachers once said beautifully, he said that, and this was like a motivation for us, to continue studying once you graduate and things. He says, listen, a day will come, if you stop studying and stop reading and stop researching, a day will come when your knowledge will dry out. Like you can only regurgitate the same things again and again, up until a day will come where you've got nothing more to say. People will realize it, people will latch onto that, and they will know this person, there's a limit to their knowledge. When you sit with someone and they have knowledge like oozing out of them, and you can just benefit and take so much from them. And that's again a motivation for me. It's like I've got to keep studying and reading and researching and pushing myself, right? So yeah, coming back to this, social media is an amazing place because who runs social media? It's the people. You have this echo chamber. You've got these people that are giving these views, right? And most people, like the funny example I always give is marriage, right? There's a lot of marriage advice on social media, a majority of it is from unmarried people.
Right.
Right? They're telling you about, oh, watch out for this, red flag this, oh, you gotta, this terrible stuff out there. And it's just like, these people are not married. They're like just about, 18, 19-year-olds that just like have no clue about anything, right? But giving you views on gender, giving you views on this and, responsibility, and they don't have any responsibility. They're sitting at home playing PlayStation all day and then coming on Twitter. So it's just like, who's giving these views? It's just people, right? So for me, I think, you get to a point where you're a bit more grounded, a bit more mature about things, and you just stop taking what people are saying so much. You take it with a pinch of salt. There's going to be sometimes genuine warnings about people. Okay, they've done something genuine, but beyond that, it's most of the time it's what is it going to be? It's going to be a snippet of a video. It's going to be a screenshot of something that they're showing, like, warning this person. Of course, there's going to be things that I've said, that all of us have said. We've made mistakes, we've said things, you change your views. Even the great Imams that we just gave examples of, Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, do you think they didn't change their views at some point before some of them passed away? They changed like 20% of their views that they held once upon a time. They completely retracted their statements and so on. It happens to the best of people, right? So like you said, apart from the Prophet, even the Sahaba made mistakes. They're not immune to sin, right? But of course, they're the best of generations. We know that. So where does that leave us today? 12, 1300 years later from that time. So I think, take what is good. Of course, always be under the guidance of people of knowledge, of scholars. This is why we have this sanad system, this isnad system, which is a connection all the way back. It's a chain all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. That's unique to our religion. Because otherwise, as Abdullah ibn Mubarak said, he said, if it wasn't for this, لولا الإسناد لقال من شاء ما شاء. Right? Had it not been for the isnad, then any person would have said whatever they wanted to say about Islam. And unfortunately today, there's no sanad on TikTok, on Instagram. People are just like coming out and saying whatever, and people are like, oh, he looks like a religious. This woman wears a hijab, wears a niqab, so she must be knowledgeable. So let me just follow and put everything, So for me, it's just like, always take advice from people of knowledge, have some real life guidance from people. And then social media, you might come across people with good videos, good reminders. If it's good, you take it. Otherwise, the last thing I'd say on this topic is the biggest, and again, this is instilled within us by our teachers, which is, if you come across someone that their content is less about the deen or Islam, and it's more about people. All they do is talk about people. This person, stay away from this person. If that is what they're doing, then that's a huge red flag. Just stay away from that person, right? Because they're focusing more on people than actual benefiting and content, right? And if they're focusing more on, everyone else is wrong and I'm right, and they think their only way is right, then again, this is a red flag. You stay away from that person. And unfortunately, you find a lot of those individuals on the social media sphere today, which they focus on people and everyone else is wrong, I'm right. One of my teachers again once said, he put it amazingly. He was like, there's some people out there who think that Jannah is such a small place that it's only for them, right? Allah is most merciful. Jannah is huge. It can fit all of us, inshallah, right? But some people, the way their approach is like, not only me and my crew, we're in Jannah. Unfortunately, the rest of you ain't gonna make it because. So those are some of my, I guess, ramblings on this topic.
I think it's important to talk about these things because it's not common that you hear that on the other side. Recently, again, I'll be generic. There's a very famous YouTuber who made a video talking about some other Islamic scholars, and at the start of it, he criticized some things that they did, but at the start of it, he went through each of them, and he said, this person, this is something amazing that he did. This person, his Seerah series is fantastic. I was like, where was this a few years ago when I was young? If you hear that, from people of his caliber, for example, I'm like, okay, so you are able to disagree and you are able to make mistakes, and you are able to put that to the side. And,
definitely,
it doesn't mean that the person is an evil individual and he's a sellout or something. But also all the hours that you've been spending listening to his content, it doesn't mean that all of your time, all of that has been wasted. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the thing. For me, it's like what I look at, because sometimes I weigh between the two. If I look at, you've got one person on one hand who's criticizing the other, I look at the two, I'm like, okay, the one that you're criticizing, in terms of the impact that they've had, the millions of Muslims who have come closer to Islam, you know, the series that they've created, the knowledge that they've put out there, in terms of the impact, the da'wah, all of that, right? And then you, without any, like, no disrespect, but like in terms of in YouTube numbers and social media numbers are great, but on the ground, and again, you know, teachers taught us this, right? Khidmah, like service for the people, be on the ground and genuinely making a difference within your community, genuinely impacting the people around you, is zero. It's very minimal, right? But on social media, they're very loud. But on the ground, it's not there. Whereas these, mashallah, these scholars, on social media, they may have great followings. But you look on the ground and the impact is higher than that of social media numbers. That, again, for me, speaks volumes. So that's, again, something I look at, identify, that are they known in their own communities?
Yes.
Are they known? Are they doing anything? If they're not, but they're, mashallah, going global and reaching, you know, criticizing someone on the other side of the world, I'm just like, for me, it doesn't match up. Yeah.
Right. It's amazing. I think a lot of the reasons why young people in particular, they turn towards these social media influencers.
Yeah.
Especially in a place like Ireland, for example. Ireland is very different to the UK, and that's something that we stress quite a bit on the channel. But somehow, a lot of the issues that are being discussed in the UK dawah scene, that they're the exact same issues that have become our issues. Right? And like, no one's talking about them, no one cares about those issues. But that's how it is. And I think one of the reasons is because the Imams that we have, especially in Ireland, like, we don't really have that many Imams who are born and raised here who like are even fluent in speaking the English, and they can connect with the youth. And this is something that you talked about in a podcast that you did, that people who graduate from, for example, you did an Almiya course, people who do bachelors in Islamic studies, they have these degrees. They think that they don't have many career opportunities. The only opportunities that they have, they become an Imam masjid, and that's basically it. They teach children. That's what they're kind of confined to. Another issue is, especially I'll say back home, my parents are from Pakistan. There is a respect when it comes to the leader of the community and the Imam masjid, but there's this concept that we're going to send. Who are we sending to study those courses? Like, basically people who failed in all other aspects of life, like, I mean, it's no harm that they can study some
just shove
Islam.
them into
And we're not saying that that shouldn't be the case. Of course, like, learn your religion. That's only going to do benefits for yourself. But if these people are in situations where they're dealing with marriage issues, that on its own is a whole massive issue, and dealing with disagreements within the community, dealing with the youth, and you have no training, no understanding in psychology, how to deal with people. Like, there's no it's no secret why people flock to these kind of influencers for that. Very true.
And I always say, an Imam today is not just an Imam who leads prayers, but is also a teacher, is a public speaker, khatib, a counselor, marriage officiant, mediator, and the list goes on, right? The list literally goes, youth worker and everything else, right? The Imam, the expectation is on the Imam to do everything, right? And there's so many problems with that, like you said. In terms of the caliber and the quality of the scholarship that we have, like for example, whether it's in Ireland, whether it's in the UK, like you said, the kind of the mentality, the focus isn't there, especially from the parents. This is maybe something for the parents to think about, is that why is it that, the children that are underachieving, you can just go become a Maulana and, an alim or something, and no, the rest of my kids, they've got to become doctors and dentists and lawyers and so on, right? And in terms of just weighing it up, in terms of the pride isn't as much as the doctor or the one who's achieving in the other sense, right? So that's something for parents to think about, which is, putting your children and genuinely prioritizing, this area, which there's a need, because I always give the other example that a few years down the line now, when your kids have grown up, and let's say, God forbid, they're involved in the wrong things, who's the first person you go to? You go to the Imam now. Oh, Imam Sahab, please, can you do something for as if there's some magic dua or something? Your child is fixed now. Like, now you come to the Imam who you think magically is, no, you should have brought your kid from the beginning. You know, the education begins at a young age. You know, as we know, should have brought them to the masjid, should have given them a sense of environment, even if they're not praying, bring them to the masjid. Let them see, you know, what Islam is all about. Let them get comfortable with it, Quran, you know, practices, etc. Here's another thing I'll mention, right, which you know, I've been speaking a lot about recently, is, again, you know, one thing that we push our children to do is just, okay, you're going to go to the madrasa and you're just going to read Quran, learn somehow how to read Quran. The day you do khatam, you're out. You know, my child has done khatam of Quran.
Yeah.
Great. What an achievement, right? In terms of instilling the right beliefs, the practices, the character, you know, good morals, good conduct, where's all of that? Okay, my child finished the Quran. They memorized a few du'as, which is regurgitating, okay, Allahumma this, Rabbana this. They know a few du'as. My child is great now. That's not going to make a child a good, devoted, you know, proud Muslim growing up. Because you pull them out of madrasa by the age of 12 or 13. Like, this is a process. You got to really invest in that. And the other example I give is, like, you know, in the UK anyway, you know, a private maths tutor, science tutor. Oh, please, how much? £40 an hour, 50? I'll give you whatever. Quran teacher, oh, seriously, £5 an hour. No, please, discount.
Yeah.
You know, that's too much. Again, the priorities aren't there. We're just not prioritizing, right? So I think that needs to change. And I think, especially this generation coming up, if we can really, you know, think hard about these points, so inshallah, the next generation after us, our children, their children, if we can change that, I think that will have a huge impact. I think that's the first thing. I've forgotten what the question was, to be honest. I'm just talking about something else.
I think actually that leads nicely into the next point, which is the Muslim youth. We, again, social media. I mean, you have the dawah sphere, and you have you have the self-improvement kind of genre, and like there's so much. You have the red pill, and you have a lot of different different areas here. And again, you can go back to that concept of take the good and leave the bad. A lot of people forget that, okay, if you agree with one thing that a person said, it's like you agree with everything that they said. But this is like recently, yes, we're going there. We're going there. Recently, there's been a very influential individual who accepted Islam.
Oh, I have no idea who you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone has.
No idea.
Yeah. So what? How do I say this now? Especially since he became Muslim, a lot of Muslims, they're accepting of the fact that, okay, look, he's a revert. We can take some things, and he's obviously not knowledgeable on Islam. He's not a scholar, so we can't expect that he knows everything. But for me, I was like, even before he became Muslim, a lot of these Muslim influencers who have been talking about him, even before he became Muslim, he's been saying things about Islam, or he's been saying things in general about improving yourself as an individual.
Yeah.
Fair enough, like the way that he's been saying it, like I wouldn't fully agree with that, but he's been saying things that make sense, and he's been saying things that need to be said, but aren't being said in safe places. For example, the masjid or the home, those kind of communities. So that's why people are going to those areas. And coming back to the example of the Imam Masjid, and I'll give the example, you actually mentioned that it's okay for an Imam to have a business. It's okay for an Imam to have those kind of interests that they're pursuing on the side. And I'll give the example of Maulana Tariq Jamil, for example. He started a business recently, or a few years ago I think it was, and he's been put under fire for that. And he's had to explain that why he had this business and he has to fund his madrasas and stuff. And I'm like this mentality is like what do you expect then of the Muslims in terms of the representations of what Islam is?
Yeah. Well, what's the other alternative? The other alternative is that an Imam, and by the way, I know Imams personally, right? Full-time Imam. But on the weekends or any free time they get, the Uber driver, the driving instructors, they're doing night shifts in like Tesco's or something like that, right, in a supermarket. Because firstly, the salary that they're getting, again, it's almost like a reflection of, even though the job title is like I said, all those 10 different areas, but it reflects the attitude towards the Imams and the value that we hold towards them. So salary doesn't cover it. It's so he has to go and now do other things. And what happens is that eats into his role as an Imam. So he's not going to fully deliver as an Imam because you're not paying me enough.
Yeah.
So, this is the quality that you're going to get in return. And then this is where it's just a vicious cycle that goes around, right? So the alternative is that the Imam is basically just completely, under just one thing and barely provided for, and just gives a really low quality service. Or the Imam becomes a bit more self-sufficient and does other things and goes into other ventures and can focus on this, and actually it funds other areas, and he doesn't have to be so stressed out. So I think again it's this. I think they call it like pious poverty or something like this, right? It's literally almost like, well, you have to be poor and detached from dunya, and wearing rough and shoddy clothes and looking rough and disheveled hair and things, and that means that you're a really good, righteous, pious Muslim, and that's a reflection of who an Imam is, a leader of the community. I don't know where this idea came from. I mean, of course there were people in our past, from our history, that chose a certain lifestyle. They chose to become detached, and they did they did wear clothes where they didn't have, but that's because they didn't have a choice. Like it's not like they had 10 outfits to choose from, but they chose the one with patches and things. They lived that life. They were poor and so on, right? But if you have an opportunity to do different things and go into different things as an Imam, like I 100% encourage young graduates, Imams, to go into different things. Don't box yourself into one area. And like you said earlier on, right, I've mentioned this before, don't think that you only have to become, I mean, yes, Imam of a masjid is great, like in terms of the honor that they carry and the work that they do. I personally, I don't think I can touch anything that they've done. Like what they deliver on a daily basis, subhanAllah, I don't think I can even get close to that. And sometimes I actually feel guilty. I'm not even gonna lie. I've spoken to my wife about this, where sometimes I say to her, like, I don't know, I feel guilty. I don't feel like I'm doing enough, because I look at what these Imams are doing. I'm like, wow, I'm living some easy life, and she's like, oh, just, you're doing okay, kind of thing. Just carry on what you're doing and grow that. But yeah, we can't get close to that. But at the same time, there's only so many Imams that can exist at one time. Right. Imams of mosques. There's only so many mosques that there are. So what are the rest going to do? Are they just going to go and become, go into some other field and drop the 10 years of study that they had? Or can you create some new things? And nowadays, I think this is the best, like almost the best time to be living in, to create new opportunities, right? It's very easy to get into, whether it's a business or something, where it doesn't have to be specific to religion. Like I have to start a business which is specific. Alhamdulillah, I have, just almost like, I'm very fortunate to have like a business which is also serving the Muslim community, like through the nikah, for example, right? So it's a religious thing. I'm serving as an Imam to some degree, and alhamdulillah, it's also a service that we're providing. We make money from it, and I'm not going to be ashamed to say that. Like I'm not going to sit here and flaunt and say, oh, I'm making a lot of money. It's a livelihood for me, and I don't think we should be ashamed to say that. And I know growing up, especially culturally, it's almost like a taboo thing. Don't speak about money. It's just get on with your life and things, right? But it's, alhamdulillah, if you're making something from it, you're making something from it. You grow that, and the more you grow it, the more you can fund into other areas, the more you can reach out to other people. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for, whether it's business, whether it's thinking outside the box, doing different things. Otherwise, like I said, you're boxed in, and when you're boxed in, you can't make your own decisions. Yes. You can't do your own things. You have to go through so many different avenues to finally do something, right? But if you're a bit more independent, alhamdulillah, you can go and organize these events. Yeah, right. You can do different things. Yeah.
You hit on something interesting there. And not to say everything else you've been saying it wasn't interesting, but the idea of pious poverty, which is something that a lot of Muslims we have this idea that it's and that money is poison. Like you're not allowed to have money, and it's unjustifiable under any circumstances to have money with yourself.
Yeah.
I think this is starting to change, or I don't know what's going on the social media situation. But the problem with social media is that if someone tries to come with the other opinion, it's so outlandish, and the way that it's brought about is okay, but the way you're saying it, like that doesn't sound right. I mean, and you have examples in in our history, you have, I think it was Imam Malik, rahimahullah, who had a lot of money. And when he would go for his halaqas, he would wear expensive clothing and he would dress well.
Yeah.
And when he was asked about this, like, he would say that I am representing, I have knowledge of Islam. I'm trying to represent that in the best way.
Yeah.
So that, like, when people come to me, they're like, okay, you have something valuable.
Yeah.
So you respect yourself. Like, if you have the Quran yourself, you have to respect in yourself. You have to respect what you have as a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's obviously the balance between the blessings and the humility that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can go as far back as the Sahaba.
Yeah.
This is another point, that different Muslims can have different personalities.
Yeah,
you can have different interests, and there's not just this one ideal, the Muslim personality. If that was the case, that is the case of the Prophet ﷺ, of course. But you look at the Sahaba and you're like, they had different interests, they had different circumstances. Some of them had money, some of them didn't have money. And money is something that we talk about and we focus on a lot nowadays. You have Uthman radiallahu anhu, who was very wealthy. And through him, Islam benefited so much because of the money that he gave. In one of the battles, I can't remember which one it was, but he almost funded the entire expedition just himself. And you have the well that he bought with his money. You have all this that he could give. I think it was the same expedition that the Prophet, he was seeking funds for it. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, he stood up and he said, 100 camels and everything on them, Ya Rasulullah. Then the Prophet, he continued to ask, and he stood up again. He said 200 camels. Then he continued to ask. He said 300 camels. And we need people like this in the community. So, I mean, money, you can say that it doesn't buy happiness, but it's so important to have, and it makes life a lot easier if you have that.
Yeah, 100% it does. And yeah, Uthman radiallahu anhu's example is great. And there's so many other Sahaba. You know, Imam Abu Hanifa himself was a merchant. He was a businessman. Then he left that behind. But you have to think this way, right? If he didn't do that, then how did he fund his studies and become independent, become the man that he was? A lot of these scholars, they were quite wealthy, whether they inherited that money, like Imam Malik, actually, it said that, you know, a lot of it, Imam Bukhari as well, they inherited this money from their fathers and so on, right? Because their fathers were honest, they were businessmen, and they became independent. Because otherwise, what would have happened is, you know, every little thing you got to charge for, or you know, in that kind of era, you got to go to where the royals and basically the sultan, and you got to, what happens then? You know what happens, right? Politically, when a scholar enters into that, you know, you're dictated by, you know, the authority at the time. But so a lot of them wanted to become independent from that. They're like, you know, we don't want to receive money from the sultan or from the government. We want our own wealth. And that was a very clever way of thinking, right? And almost today you can apply that and say, yeah, whether you're a scholar or whether just generally as a Muslim, right, there's just some etiquettes that you need to apply when it comes to money. And Allah has placed all those principles in the Quran, whether it's, you know, avoiding extravagance, but at the same time avoiding miserliness. He says, وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا. You've got to be balanced, you've got to be moderate in between. So you've got that aspect, you've got the arrogance aspect, not flaunting wealth and, you know, and looking down on others because of it, right? But at the same time, not being so humble that, you know, like there's that famous incident with Umar radiallahu anhu where he sees this man walking on the streets, right, with his back lowered, and he says, "What's wrong with your back?" He says, "Oh, nothing. I'm just trying to show that I'm humble." So he just smacked the guy. He said, "Put your back straight. This is a sign of arrogance, because actually it's not humility. Because you walking around like this, it's as if you're trying to say, I'm better than everyone else. You're not walking with your back." So he says, humility is in the heart, right? So it's not about the patchy clothing and things. That's not humility. Humility is you can wear nice clothes, but it's the way you are with people, what you think of people, your character towards them. That's true humility. So these kind of principles, of course, the most important one being halal, you know, halal livelihood, avoiding things like riba and you know, avoiding haram, questionable, you know, sources of income. So these types of things, if you tick those boxes, right, and you apply these areas, then really what's wrong with that? Alhamdulillah, it's a good thing, right? And like you said, it makes life easier. You can give back to the community. You can invest in different areas. You know, you can be influential in your own different way. I think it ticks all boxes. So we're not saying that every Muslim has to reach this kind of level. Right. There's plenty of Muslims out there who are just happy with the kind of moderate lifestyle that they're living, this income that they have. Alhamdulillah, that's great. But we need Muslims in all areas.
Yeah.
But particularly, like I said, the students of knowledge and the Imams, particularly for them, I'm emphasizing, I guess, coming from that background. And I've been through that struggle of moving out from home, living in, I'm sure you know London, what the prices are like, Dublin's no less, but London is on another level, right? But living away from home and parents, funding things like paying for rent, funding my studies and so on, right? It was tough. And for me, I learned that, I learned that independence, and I learned that, am I going to rely on, doing small things here and there where I'm dedicating, I can't even study because I'm juggling like 5-6 different things, right? One of my teachers gave beautiful advice. One of my mentors from Medina, he said that, listen, because at one point I remember while I was still studying, I had like 6-7 different things that I'm working on, right? And for me, it seemed impressive. Oh, I'm working on this, I'm volunteering with this, I've got this side thing going on, right? And for me, I'm thinking I'm doing so much. He said to me, listen, the ummah doesn't need your 6-7 half-baked, the ummah doesn't need that from you. He says the ummah needs you to focus on, maybe 2-3 max things that you can put your heart into and do properly with ihsan. And when he said that, that changed everything. Now I only have like 2-3 focus areas. Of course, I get involved in other things, but 2-3 focus, like where I put all my heart into. And I feel like that impact is, alhamdulillah, is a lot more. So I think if more people can follow that, inshallah, instead of like doing just 10 different things, trying and focus on different areas, inshallah, more specific, then I think that would be more impactful.
Inshallah, very good. Coming closer to the end, when I bring this up, you're going to be like, yeah, we're nowhere closer to the end now with this topic.
Okay.
But you're the founder of the Nikah company.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about marriage. And now all the young brothers and sisters
So
are
this is part 2 of the podcast.
This is part 2 of the podcast, yeah. All the young lads are going to be like, okay, like, why didn't you say this before? Whenever that's mentioned in an event, like, the crowd gets rowdy.
Yeah. It's the most well-attended events that I've ever been to.
My God. Yeah.
Anything with marriage or relationships, the room is packed. Anything else, Quran, no. But having said that, though, that says something, doesn't it? It says something about the Muslims out there. They're hungry for this. They are growing up. We want educated on these things. We want given these frank conversations, adulthood, relationships. What happens if you like someone of the opposite gender? Is dating even allowed? Okay, how do you know you're ready for marriage? God forbid you talk even about, intimacy or things to do with sexuality. God forbid, stuff like that. Let's not even go there, right? So that shows something. Honestly, I'm, we laugh about it and things, but genuinely, I'm so like, I feel like there's so much to do for the young Muslims, so much education that's required. Because then you take that side, and then you see when Muslims do get married and the divorce rates and things, there's something not going right. And that's because they're not educated. They don't know what it takes to be. And then, going back to these examples we gave earlier on of these certain individuals who have embraced Islam and come right. Why are people flocking to this? Because who's talking to them about masculinity? Who's talking to them about what it means to be a man or woman today? Who's talking to them about what relationships mean and how to be successful? They don't have anything apart from what their parents have done. So now they're flocking to these individuals saying, oh wow, he or she is saying it like how it needs to be said. Yeah, this is, this person is who I need to follow and emulate even, right? And that's an extreme, of course, to emulate and to follow to that degree, right? But there's something missing. There's a substance missing. Yeah. So yeah, go on. Tafaddal, let's
tackle this issue. We're going to start off on what seems like a very depressing kind of note, but is marriage really... what's going on here?
Really what?
Is marriage really the ultimate solution? Especially, I'd say, like talking about advice from unmarried brothers. Disclaimer: I'm not married yet. But is marriage really the solution to everything? What's going on here? But like everything. The idea is that like there's this, if I can say it's a trend, that young people try to get married as soon as possible, and in a sense, of course, you want to make things easy. Yeah. But at the same time, you don't want to make things too easy. And what do you mean too easy? Like for example, there's certain cultural barriers. There, like if you have the meher, for example, there's a reason that it's supposed to be a little bit difficult to fulfill those barriers.
Right.
Because there's huge responsibility that comes with getting married and starting a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think people, like the young lads, they, girls and guys, I think it's more so with the guys. I don't really know. You know more about this than myself. But we think that, okay, I'm struggling with my life. Let me get married without really, like, and I'm not paying for the meher. I'm still living in my mother's basement. And you don't have that responsibility. And you go into that without that understanding of responsibility.
Yeah.
And you start a family with that. Is that really something that we need? And then you have families who are being built on that kind of base. So do you get what I'm trying to say there?
100%.
Yeah.
The reason why I was laughing is because the moment you asked the question, I knew exactly where you were going with it. I just knew where it was going. But for most people, they wouldn't really figure it out because they're thinking, well, what does that mean? You know, to even be married, and does it solve all the problems, right? So of course it's a yes and no thing, because you know marriage is amazing and it's great and it's fulfilling, and you know it's a sunnah and religiously it's amazing, right? But I get where you're coming from. You're right in the sense that marriage does not solve all the problems. I'll tell you one problem it doesn't solve, and this is again guys especially, right? Guys especially, they think, okay, I'm young, there's a lot of fitna out there, right? You know, a lot of temptations, desires, everything's, you know, on a high right now based on, you know, everything I'm going through. So if I get married, fitna's gone, everything's gone, I get to fulfill my desires, all of that, right? And that's it. I'm sorry, my brother, but when you get married, fitna does not all of a sudden disappear, right? It may help initially, but you know, Allah created us in a certain way, and you know, you don't just ignore the world out there, especially the society we're living in now, which is very overly hypersexualized, right? There's a lot of fitna out there still, right? You'd be surprised. So don't think that marriage is going to solve that. Right. It will definitely help. And I know the age that and the current phase in life that you're going through, definitely it's a lot more difficult, right? But don't think marriage is going to solve everything. You know, within a few years you'll see there's still fitna out there, right? So that's just one example of marriage not solving. And in fact, just on that note, there's guys out there who get married, and it feels like the primary purpose is to fulfill their desires. Which is in and of itself, it's problematic. Because it's like, well, I can't control myself, so therefore I need to get married, and that will solve everything. But then what they quickly realize is that when marriage comes with responsibilities, like you said, and it comes with so many other things, it's a whole life journey. You got to dedicate, you got to give time to. It wasn't just for that one thing, my friend. You know, that's something that comes out of it. It's great, you know, for certain things, but it's not the primary. Do you know what I mean? Like, so going in with that mindset of that's the only thing that I'm going to gain from it is already, you know, what I would say, and what I say a lot, because we do a lot of seminars on marriage and things, is that I say, if you're struggling to control your desires and your temptations, then I wouldn't say just get married immediately. I would say you need to work on that. Work on self-control, work on controlling your desires, because marriage is not going to solve that long term, right? And unfortunately, we see this within, you know, Muslim men and the struggles that they have later on, and it causes issues within the marriage. So learn self-control, right? Okay, marriage is going to solve, for example, I'm feeling lonely right now. I desire companionship. So let me get married and that's going to solve everything. Again, if that's the primary purpose, that you just want a friend, or you want basically a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right, to whatever do, but it's just halalified, right, and you enter into a contract, then again you realize that there's more to marriage than that. So yeah, from the perspective you're coming from, absolutely, marriage does not solve everything. It's not as rosy as you may make it out to be. Initially it is. You ask any guy, even any girl, you know, and you're right, it is more of a guy thing. You know, girls usually have things a bit more figured out. They have a bit more of a plan long term, whereas guys, it's just like very short term, like, you know, this is what I want right now, this must be it. So they kind of go into marriage like that. So yeah, there's responsibilities that come with it. There's a lot of work that you need to do on yourself before you get married. There's a lot of, you know, things that you need to understand about the opposite gender even. You know, we were just talking about this yesterday, actually. We were just saying how people have such a, you know, they have such a shallow understanding of the opposite gender, and when they go into marriage and now you're living with that person, what happens is basic things you're not understanding of each other. You know, the whole thing of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? We're from different planets, literally. we operate, we think in different ways. So, we do things differently. We're wired differently, whether it's the way that Allah created us biologically, physically, mentally, psychologically, we're different, right? So you have to understand that. Going into it, you can't be like, I've met guys who got married, and after marriage, they expect the same way that I used to hang around with my boys and chill till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., go out and do whatever. I'm going to carry on that when I get married. That just doesn't work that way, because your wife's going to be like, are you giving me any time?
Yeah.
Do who are these friends of yours? What are you doing till so late, right? There's responsibility. So you have to become, you got family now, you got someone to look after. Again, whether it's financially, before marriage, you're spending money, you're blowing money however you want. You're not keeping an eye on your finances. You get married, you got to be on the ball with these things. Spiritually, before, okay, you were a bit lax, salah, Quran, things like that. When you get married now, even I'll give you this amazing example. One of my teachers, he said, that once there was a man who's a new father. He had a child, right? He had a baby, and he went to the sheikh. He went to his local sheikh, and he said, "Sheikh, please, I've just had a child. I've got a baby now, growing up quick. Please, can you give me some advice and help me out? New baby still." And the sheikh said, "You're too late."
Right.
And he was like, "What do you mean too late? My baby was just born. I've come to you at the earliest opportunity." He said, "No, you should have come to me either early, the earliest you should have come to me is before you even got married. Because the person that you're marrying is going to be the mother, you're going to be a father, so you should have thought about this stuff. Or at least you should have come to me before you had the child, because it helps you prep." So it's just an example. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that's amazing, because it's true, right? We think we have the child, or we get married, and then we're like, "Sheikh," or let me read a book or figure things out. There's a lot of prep to be done within yourself. So yeah, marriage doesn't solve everything. I think we need to focus on ourselves more before we're thinking about, as they say, before you think about, who the ideal spouse is to marry, are you the ideal spouse?
Right.
Before you think about, would you recommend me marrying this person? Would someone recommend you marrying their sister or the person that they know? A lot of times the answer is no, to be completely frank with you. Yeah.
A lot of these young guys, obviously speaking from experience, but when they get married, that's the first time that they interact with this concept of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, this thing exists. You have to be able to read. It's like you're living with your parents, which is fantastic, and you don't need to have emotional intelligence because, you just do whatever you want, and the parents are like, okay, whatever, son, you can. I guess you can do that, but this idea of emotional intelligence and trying to deal with other people, this is we can talk about this for ages, but that's also something that people need to realize exists before you get married. So that you can
empathy, empathy, how to approach, difference in opinion, or just not even conflict. When we think of conflict, we're thinking of a full-blown argument. You're throwing, cutlery around, and you throw. A disagreement is a daily part of almost a daily part of your married life, right? You disagree on the smallest things. It doesn't have to be an argument. It's just it's a disagreement. How do you deal with that? How do you approach it, right? Especially understanding the opposite gender, what they want and expect from you. Us guys, we're very kind of we're very closed off. So when we get into a disagreement, we're just like, oh, just leave me alone. Shut down. Go for a drive. Go link the boys. That's the way we process things. With women, they don't just shut off. They want to address it. They want to address it directly, explicitly, to your face, at that moment, right? And they want answers, and they want a solution, and they want an apology, and they want you to show that you love them, right? Whereas a guy will just... You need to understand that, because otherwise, every time you have a disagreement, you're going to be closed off. She's going to expect something else, and then long term, it's just not going to work. So yeah, you're right. Emotional intelligence, empathy, the art of differing, as they call it. Just character, gender differences. There's so much. So a lot of times we think as Muslims, what I need to know before I get married is I have to study fiqh of marriage or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let me study the fiqh. Okay, these are my rights. These are your rights. My responsibility is your responsibility. This is what I need to do. This is what you need to do. Okay, let's go. Ask any married couple, right? Fiqh is important. Fiqh is basically like the skeleton. But where's the meat? Where's the flesh? The flesh is the real life, the practicality, the day-to-day. Fiqh is there just to the bare minimum. But people think that your rights and responsibilities is the utmost limit of the marriage. That's the bare minimum. So if you're focused on that and you're quoting text and fiqh all the time, I'm sorry, then your marriage isn't gonna work out.
Do you know, you reminded me of a statement that, because we're not controversial enough, we need to add this. But there's a scholar in the UK who mentioned this, basically what you're saying, that if your marriage gets to the point that you're quoting hadith and verses at each other, know that things aren't great.
I've watched that video and I saw the response video. There's a response to that.
And there's it's not okay, you can try to understand what they're saying, and maybe you can give some kind of benefit of the doubt.
There was none of that.
But that's exactly it. When you're quoting the law, that this is my right. I mean, you're at the very bottom there. There's not much left, because it's all based on that emotional intelligence and that empathy and that understanding.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So so the text is there. We're not saying ignore the text, right? Ignore the Quran, ignore the Sunnah, right? But here's something that a lot of people, so they might find a hadith, right? So I always give this example. So you've got two things. You've got the Sunnah, or you've got let's say hadith, right? You've got hadith, which is text narration, and then you've got the Sunnah or the Seerah, meaning the way that the Prophet lived his life. There's certain things that you'll find in hadith,
right?
But when you look at the seerah and the actual marriage of the Prophet, you would think it doesn't match, because why? Because he, on one hand, he gave you the bare minimum. This is the skeleton, this is bare minimum. When he lived his life, he went beyond the expectations, right? And he was the best husband, of course, right? Alayhi salatu wasalam. So, so some people, they focus so much on quoting this hadith, right? But it says it in the text. But they don't see how did the Prophet live his life like that. Even there's one beautiful verse in the Quran, I think it's in Surah An-Nisa, where it speaks about the mahar, and if the separation occurs, then and the woman requests the separation, then she's the man is entitled to get the mahar back. This is one of the only cases, I know it's getting a bit technical here, one of the only cases where the man is entitled to the mahar, the dowry, back from the woman. Otherwise it's hers, right? If she requests separation. But even at the end of that verse, so everyone quotes that first part, it's mine, it's my right. But even at the end of the verse, Allah says, وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى مِنْ بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. How could you take it from her though, when you have been intimate in the past, right? وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. And she took a heavy, dense covenant from you.
Right.
So even Allah is saying, that's the minimum, bare minimum. But seriously, you've been married. How could you take it back from her? You gave her that mahar. There was an understanding. So subhanAllah, people just they pick and choose when it comes to the text, right? And they divorce it from the context. Mind the pun, right? They completely separate it from the context in its entirety. So I think that's another problem.
It's absolutely amazing. We'll move on to the last topic, I promise. But before, just to cover myself and my brother for future guests, we follow the advice of Imam Malik that we can take the good and leave the bad. We agree with certain things that people say and we disagree. So it's not like we're condemning everyone. So
of course,
that's just to cover ourselves. The last area I wanted to cover was you're a facilitator for FaithSpaceUK. Yeah. Can you tell us more about this space?
Yeah. FaithSpace is quite interesting, alhamdulillah. What a lot of people don't know is that obviously this is FaithSpaceUK. That was the first one that we started. But a lot of people don't know that it's actually been replicated in other cities in the world. So there's FaithSpace in Ottawa in Canada. There's FaithSpace in New York, in America.
It's through the same group, is it?
Yeah, through the same. FaithSpace in Texas also. So it's mainly in the US, but the London one or the UK one was the first. So it's running quite strong on that, and that's actually our vision, was to actually start and emulate these kind of spaces throughout the world. The whole purpose was for it. To be completely honest with you, you have the masjid, which is the place for Muslims. Everyone should be going to the masjid, and the masjid should cater. It's a community center, right? But unfortunately, there's a huge demographic of Muslims who maybe don't feel ready to go to the masjid. They feel like if they go, they're going to be judged. There's sisters who don't wear hijab. They don't dress in a certain way. There's guys who barely know how to pray salah. They don't even know the basics, right? They don't even know how to perform wudu properly. They're just very not confident. They're just not there yet. So they feel like if they go to the masjid, they're going to do something wrong. Someone's going to judge them, point fingers at them. Hey, why are you wearing shorts for? Why you got a tattoo for? Why you don't have a hijab? So so we're trying to create a space which is welcoming. That's kind of in the middle. It's think of it like, I give this example, right? Think of it like in the Seerah you have Mecca and you have Medina.
Right.
When Islam, when the Quran was first revealed, when Islam was very new, the Muslims were in Mecca. So they're new to it, right? And Mecca was like, almost like the hub for them, where they're just trying to learn and grow and learn the basics like Tawheed, just the oneness of Allah, the message of the Quran, character, morals, right, things like that. And what's really interesting, by the way, just on a side note, is that if you look at all the Meccan chapters in the Quran, they barely touch on rulings and legal rulings and things like that. It's mainly like stories, basic principles like Tawheed, or the Quran being the message, or the Day of Judgment, the afterlife. It's touching on like generic stuff because it's just trying to build their iman, right, up into a certain level. Then they go to Medina, they migrate to Medina, and now you've got your Surah Baqarahs and these surahs being revealed. Right now it's like, right, you've got, whether it's Islamic finance or hijab or alcohol is outlawed, and 5 times daily prayers and all of that now comes into play.
One after another as well.
One after the other, right? Zakat, etc., right? Because they're ready for it. 13 years Makkah, now they're prepared. So think of it like that, with that kind of thinking in mind, that kind of framework in mind. That's what FaithSpace really is. It's like you're building the iman, building the faith of what I would personally say is like 90% of the Muslim ummah. The 5%, 10% are the people who have studied and mashallah have been practicing for a long time, and they've come from that background and they're academic and they know, most of the discussions online today, 90%, 95% of the population, they don't understand what you're talking about. You're talking about this really polemical, intricate aqidah issue, right? And people are just like, I believe in one God. I pray 5 times daily prayers. I don't know what this sect is, what this debate is all about, what this ideology is. I'm just, do you know what I mean? So you've got that. I'm saying that's fine. You can have that, right? But that's like 5% of the population. The rest are literally struggling to pray salah. The rest are struggling with their faith. The rest, are struggling spiritually. They're tackling materialism. They're tackling this, all of these things, right? So that's what we're trying to build them. We're not going into deep things. We're just talking about salah. We're talking about the 99 names of Allah. We're sharing stories of Surah Yusuf and Surah Maryam, etc. Right? Just building their iman. Inshallah, one day they will be ready to go to the masjid. They'll be ready to study further. That's all it is. And it was, because like you said, right, we've touched on some controversial areas, so we might as well end with one, which is that we've had a bit of a pushback for it, especially initially when we started in London, etc. Pushback was for a couple of things. One was almost like we're trying to take people away from the masjid. That was one. It's like you're trying to start something else. Again, our clarification is we're not taking people away from the masjid. They wouldn't have gone to the masjid in the first place.
Right.
We're just trying to be the bridge, right? Inshallah, we're going to build them up, and they were literally like so whenever we get a chance, we pray in congregation, right? So as is the standard, the men pray at the front, the women pray at the back. There are literally some sisters, like a lot of sisters, said to us that, wallahi, this was the first time we've ever prayed in congregation. We've never had that experience before, and that helped us so much, right? Stuff like that, just basic things like they wouldn't have prayed otherwise, but they prayed because we prayed together and they made wudu, etc. Right? So small things like that. For us, for me, that was a milestone. I was like, we helped facilitate your first congregational prayer. For me, that was like, alhamdulillah, like that was amazing, right? It wasn't a huge thing for other people, but for me, that was a great thing. There's that, and then there's also the kind of setup that we have, which is a bit, I'm not going to go too into this, but our setup is we don't have a physical barrier.
Okay.
That's just what it is, right? We don't have a physical segregational barrier at our events, and that was, if I'm honest with you, that was intentional. It was intentional because it's like a welcoming space, etc. Now, of course, the extreme would be making it so welcoming that everything goes, everything and anything goes. We're not about that, right? But we're trying to implement what we believe to be, correct. That's ultimately what it is. But we believe that if we didn't think it was correct, then we wouldn't have done it, right? Inshallah, we hope anyway. So for us, for me personally, and for the team, for the scholars that I've consulted with, some of my teachers disagree with it, by the way, and that's the beauty of it. I have teachers who are Maliki, who are Hanafi, who are Shafi'i, who are from different parts of the world, right? Who follow different ideologies and so on. And that's the beauty. Some of my teachers don't agree with it. There's some that encouraged it and said, yeah, it's fine. But ultimately what it comes down to is what I genuinely believe is that you can have an organic segregation.
Yeah.
You can respectfully communicate with the opposite gender. And as long as, again, you build, instead of focusing on certain things, you build yourself. The Prophet, he did tarbiyah of the companions of the Prophet. So even in the masjid of the Prophet, there was no physical barrier.
I was about to mention that. Yeah.
In fact, up until, one of my teachers, Sheikh Hasib Noor, he mentioned that up until the 80s or 90s in Medina,
Really?
the 90s, like some of us were just before we were born, that's when they introduced the separate section for women in Medina.
I
up
can't
until
believe
then,
that.
Wallah, he showed us pictures from the 90s where women were praying in the same area. Right. In Mecca, as we know, by the way, there's no physical.
Of course.
In Mecca, anyway, there's no physical segregation. In Medina, just in the 90s, they introduced that, right? So, and the Masjid of the Prophet, that's how it was. There was this woman at the back, and there was beautiful things that he would do. Like, for example, there were separate entrances for the women. He would let them leave first. He'd say to the men, "You give them some time to leave, right?" The Prophet, like it's almost like a sunnah. The Imam, after the prayer, he turns around.
Yeah.
He turns around after the salam, right? The Prophet would delay that.
Okay.
So he wouldn't turn around immediately. He would just let the woman go, and then he would turn around. Just some amazing, just tarbiyah, like basic things, like consideration and respect for them, right? And then if they did want to stay and if there was interaction, it would just be respectful, right? You lower the gaze, you have respect in the way you do things, right? That's it. So that is like spiritual tarbiyah. That's what should be instilled within all Muslims. That's what we believe. That's what we're just trying to build in that space where you can, because you're going to go to university, you're sitting in the same lecture hall. You're going to go to the workplace, you're sitting next to Stacey and and Amy, right? You're going to the shop, you're going to the shopping mall, you're there and you're interacting. So if you're in an Islamic space, all of a sudden it's like no stuff like that, I can't, right? We're not sitting next to each other and it's just all there is missing is just a physical barrier. Yeah, that's what it is. And personally, that's what I believe is organic segregation. That's what was in the time of the Prophet. And of course, we got pushback for that because that's not the norm in most kind of settings. And if you disagree with that, no problem. Like if you're not comfortable coming to that setting, if you disagree with that from different viewpoints, I'm more than happy to hear you out. But what I don't appreciate is just the snidey remarks and comments or the backbiting or let's speak and let's chat and let's have a dialogue about it. And if you disagree, we agree to disagree because it's just one of many issues that we would probably disagree on. But inshallah, we hope that the impact and what's being created from these events that we're running, inshallah, will be will be long term, will be huge for the community, inshallah.
Like you're tapping into a group, and we're definitely finishing now. You're tapping into a group that we need to fully embrace. I mean, you're embracing that group that we need to completely embrace. And recently we were on Instagram. We're taking over the Islamic Relief Ireland Instagram page, actually, the stories. Actually, shout out to Islamic Relief for facilitating this meetup that we have. And we really appreciate the time that you've given us. But we've been talking about just having that understanding and that empathy and being able to talk to other people, even if you disagree or if you agree, just being able to hear the other side. Not only is that important for like the 90%, the 95% you're saying that who just have a Muslim name and they don't really have anything else that connects them with Islam, but even that percentage who are connected to Islam and they do pray and they are practicing Muslims. Even with them, it's useful to have that mindset. The only situation that makes sense that I can think of that you can be very technical and very rigid about talking about the minutiae about the fiqhi point of this is if you have ulama, experts of fiqh, and they're discussing that particular issue in a fatwa council or something. And even that, just having a bit of empathy and being able to hear other people, that goes such a long way.
And I think it's literally it's these devices that it's so easy now, right, to just type something behind an account, anonymous, whatever, right, or hidden behind some other name or title. It's taken everything away from that dialogue. It's just so easy to comment something or to say something, to make some remarks. I think this is a problem in that sense where it's just so easy. Whereas once upon a time you would have had to communicate in person, go up to that person, right, or you write a letter to them and it gets there, a long time later. But I think this is so easy. Within a few seconds, type something, goes to someone on the other side of the world. If I disagree with you, this is my thing. I don't even want to hear you out. So it's just no empathy, no understanding, nothing.
Yeah.
So I think like with many issues, there's always going to be areas which are almost like grey areas or areas of disagreement. I think it goes back to everything we've been talking about today so far. It's like take it from the right places, the right sources. Always have guidance from someone that is trusted. In-person interaction, taking it from a local imam or sheikh or someone, right, that you can relate to. Otherwise, it's very easy to just get caught up in this web of, confusion. We did an event, again, with Sheikh Hasib Noor. It's called the M's of Confusion, right? The M's of Confusion. And basically, the M's, music, mortgage, mawlid, meat, right? So basically all these M's, which Muslims are like, it's the main kind of talking points, right? Yeah. So we have an event about this, about difference of opinion and stuff. So it's quite a fun one, yeah. Maybe for another time we'll discuss those topics.
Inshallah. And just to finish off, inshallah, I think I said that for the fourth time. I think we might have a counter there. But I think one of the most beautiful ways to connect with people who are perhaps aren't Muslim, even people who are Muslim, people who aren't very, again, quote unquote, practicing, is a beautiful recitation of Quran. Recently, I was at an event, and like you can make an assumption that a large majority, they're cultural Muslims, and I say this with quotation marks, and what exactly does that mean? But you get what I'm trying to say. Cultural Muslims, and you also have some who are quote unquote practicing. But when you recite Quran in a beautiful way, that's such a strong way to connect with everyone. Definitely. I was looking at the people, and I was like, everyone was just focused. I was like, that's amazing. Alhamdulillah, we memorized the Quran and we're able to recite in a beautiful way. But of course, it's the words of Allah. It's the blessings of the divine revelation. But that's something that I wanted to suggest to people who are in leadership positions in mosques and in ISOCs in particular. When you do arrange an event and you have the opportunity to give the adhan and to recite Quran, make sure that you choose someone who is able to recite in a beautiful way, because people who come to ISOC events sometimes, an iftar or something, they might not have a strong connection with the masjid, but they come for the vibe, they come for the environment, and when they listen to Quran, they're like, that can really have such a moving experience for a person. So to finish off, I just wanted to request if you could recite a few verses of the Quran to finish off our first podcast, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Shabbir Hassan, for being our guest today. And Jazakallah khair everyone for joining us and for hopefully sticking with us till the end. It was an absolute honor for us to have you with us, and inshallah we'll have you back very soon.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.